Let me walk you through the important terms in identity server. The first one is client. A client is a piece of software that requests token from your identity server. The token can either be for authenticating a user, in that case it will request an identity token, or for accessing a resource, in that case it will be an access token. A client must first be registered within your identity server before it can request token. The next thing that we have is an API resource. API resources represent a functionality a client wants to invoke, typically a web API, but not necessary. Resources in general is something that you want to protect with your identity server, and that is of two types. The first one that we just saw is the API resource, and the next one is identity resource. Identity resource will have the information about user, like name of the user or email address. You can of course add more properties there, but the identity resource is basically user information, whereas API resource is something that your API wants to access, like a web API or a microservice. Then when I was explaining client, I mentioned two types of tokens, identity token and access token. These tokens will typically be aligned with the resources. So an identity token represents the outcome of the authentication process. It contains at bare minimum an identifier for the user. It will have a special key with the name of sub, and it will be subject claim. This identity token will also have information about how and when the user was authenticated. It will also contain additional identity-related data. The next token is related to the API resource, which is access token. An access token allows access to an API resource. Client will request access token from the identity server, and then this access token will be forwarded to an API. The access tokens contains information about the client and user if present. APIs will use this information to authorize access to their data and functionality. So these are the critical terms that you should understand with the identity server. Once you are comfortable with these 5 terms, we will be creating API resources, will be extracting tokens, and will be creating clients from the next video. So after the basic theory, it's time to get our hands dirty and start working on identity server.